Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for tonight's webinar. This is the new FAFSA form webinar and what you guys need to know about all these changes to the FAFSA form. My name is Ronnie Lau. I'm a manager in government relations here at the National Education Association, and it's a pleasure to have you all join us this evening. This is something new that we're doing in terms of student loan and student debt related topics, but there's been some big changes with the new FAFSA, so we thought this would be beneficial to cover for a lot of our members out there who either may be in school currently looking to fill out the FAFSA or have dependent students that are looking to fill out the FAFSA for the upcoming school year. We'll do a round of intros in the beginning. I'll pass it over to my colleague Sam to start off.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. My name is Samuel Dunyetz. I'm a senior policy analyst within the Education Policy and Implementation Center here at NEA. And with that, I'll pass it over to my colleague, Matt.
Thanks, Sam, and welcome everyone. I'm a law fellow in the Office of General Counsel here at EA, and I help Ronnie and Sam and the rest of the student debt team. And I will pass it to Scott.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Scott Kish, and I'm with NEA Member Benefits. We work in conjunction with the NEA on helping develop solutions for members to deal with things like paying for college and managing student debt. And I'll throw it back to Ronnie and he can get started.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Scott. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. Just wanted to let folks know that the chat has been disabled. However, if you do need to raise anything in terms of questions, there is the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom that you can use to log your questions in there. We do ask you to log your questions and wait until the end to submit those, just because we're covering a lot of content and there might be some answers to your questions as we go through this slide presentation. And beyond that, any questions that we don't get to live during this webinar, we will get to afterwards. We will provide written answers for them, which we'll disseminate out to all the registrants at the end of the webinar. Just to let also folks know, this webinar is also being recorded, so don't worry if you missed anything and need to circle back to anything. We will also provide a PDF version of the slides as well, especially for all the links and stuff like that that will be present within this webinar that you might need to click on. So without further ado, we'll get started. So just to cover the latest of NEA resources, if you guys want to track anything that's student debt related by the National Education Association, you can text the word student debt, one word, to 48744, and that will present you this really short survey that you see on your left side. We just like that to get a little bit of an understanding about what you're interested in with student loans. And it'll put you on your list to get things like this webinar and other resources that we produce out of the NEA that are educator-centric. And if you're not an NEA member, we hope you highly consider joining us today. You can head to nea.org/join to learn more. So just to cover some agenda and objectives today for today's webinar, the first thing is we're going to cover is the improvements of the FAFSA form. Second, we'll go look at submitting your FAFSA, and we'll walk through step-by-steps of what changed with these new situations with the FAFSA. And then 3, we'll look at key deadlines to this year's FAFSA, just because it had a delayed rollout and there's some new timetables that may not be typical to the current FAFSA process. And then finally, we'll conclude with frequently asked questions that we've seen so far with interacting with members on this issue. And some of the key objectives you'll learn from this is just the main changes to FAFSA, which you'll garner from this, and successfully submitting your FAFSA, of course, for this upcoming academic year. And I'll turn it over to Sam.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. So before we kind of begin, I guess the question is, why is the FAFSA changing at all? Well, the short answer is, for a very long time, no one liked filling out the FAFSA. It was extremely long, very, very detailed questions that took a long time to complete. And for both people completing it as well as for policymakers, that represented a barrier to getting financial aid access to more students. So in the 116th Congress, the FAFSA Simplification Act and the Future Act were passed. That changed the FAFSA, both in terms of what the form itself would be, as well as what it would do. So one of the bigger changes comes down to the terminology used. So previously, the term expected family contribution, or EFC, that was what a family was expected to contribute to that student's education. That, very similar, is now called the Student Aid Index, or SAI. So if you are filling out the new FAFSA and you see SAI, it will be similar to the EFC. One of the other things that it does, it modifies the family definitions in FAFSA formulas. It has a better encapsulation of different types of families in the US. And so the term that is now used for someone that is filling out a form is called a contributor. We'll get into some of the other details in a bit, but if you come across these terms, they may not be that different. It may just be the words that are used. Now, one of the other bigger changes is the expanding access to federal Pell Grants. As I said, the goal of this was to have more financial aid access for more people. And part of this was to allow more people to be eligible for federal Pell Grants. It also streamlined the FAFSA form. As you can see, Senator Lamar Alexander right there holding the old FAFSA form. It was very long, and being able to shorten it helps increase access. And finally, one of the most, I would say, kind of groundbreaking things as far as ease of use was to allow a direct data exchange between the IRS and federal student aid to basically allow data that already exists to talk to one another. So instead of having to submit information multiple times, the government already has that. They're able to use that.
So in actuality, what does some of these things mean? So Sam went into a little bit of that, but there's a ton of new improvements that are hopefully helping more students with the new FAFSA form. So first and foremost, the FAFSA now with the new income-based requirements and how it's looking at income is designed to unlock up to $114 billion more in federal financial aid for up to 18 million students now. And it's going to do a ton of great things to Pell Grants. So 610,000 new students from different low-income backgrounds will now be able to receive the federal Pell Grant. And 1.5 million more students now will be able to receive the maximum Pell Grant. And that will bring a total of folks that will be able to touch the maximum Pell Grant at 5.2 million, which is really impressive. So more and more low-income based background students now will be able to access higher education and get more financial aid from the Pell Grant because of this form. The number of questions now have also been significantly reduced. So for some, you might even take less than 10 or 15 minutes to complete the new FAFSA form at this time. The FAFSA is now being offered in up to 11 different languages. A lot of common situations in the past, the FAFSA was only being offered in English and Spanish. And now we're seeing it offered in some of the 11 most common languages here spoken in the US. And then eligibility is also being restored for incarcerated students to receive the Pell Grant. And then finally, the federal Pell Grant lifetime eligibility will also be restored to students whose schools were closed while they were enrolled, or if the school was found to be misled for the students. And that's big in terms of a lot of the for-profit accountability that the NEA has been advocating for, which is really huge on that front. So let's talk about submitting your FAFSA.
So the new FAFSA launched, had a soft launch on December 30th of last year for the 2024 to 2025 academic year. So that academic year encompasses periods of July 1st of this year and June 30th of next year. That's if you have a student that is expected to go to school during that time, you will use the new FAFSA. Now, since it launched, as of earlier this month, there have been 4 million forms that have been successfully submitted, which it's great to see early on such a robust response from this. Now, in terms of timeline, just really quick, we kind of have this listed. As far as now, you should complete and submit the form if you're able. In March, the department will start transmitting that to schools that you have indicated and state agencies to actually go ahead and process them. Later this spring, the schools that receive that will review them and at that point are able to offer their financial aid packages to students. And as I mentioned earlier, on July 1st, the award year starts where the money can actually be awarded as part of those packages.
So there are a couple of different FAFSA filing options and 3 main methods to file for it. The first one is the most recommended one. You log into FAFSA.gov and apply online. You can also complete the FAFSA form by using a PDF version of the form. You have to print it out and then mail the FAFSA form for processing to the U.S. Department of Education. And then third, you could also request a printout of the FAFSA PDF by calling the U.S. Department of Education's Federal Student Aid Office, and there's the telephone number there. And then similar to above, then you can fill it out and then mail it for processing. But number one is definitely the most recommended method that we tell folks to do. And so one of the biggest things is about filling out for the online method is the use of your FSA ID. It is recommended that you use the studentaid.gov account, which is the FSA ID, to fill out your FAFSA form. If you do not have an account, you can easily create one on studentaid.gov. And your FSA ID does more than just for FAFSA applications. It provides you a wealth of knowledge and access to a student debt dashboard that provides you historical information on a ton of your own student loans and also for your dependents. And also, it's used as the way as the unified portal for all these different types of forgiveness opportunities, like public service loan forgiveness that is of interest to our NEA members. If you do already have an FSA ID, whether it's for your own student loans or for your dependents to fill out the FAFSA, you should make sure that all your contact information is up to date in case the Department of Ed or its servicers need to contact you for any reason.
So to begin the form, as Ronnie mentioned earlier, all of this will be available, so do not feel like you have to look really closely at everything I'm about to say. But to begin the form, you will go to that FAFSA form on the FSA page and select Start New Form. You will then go to a login page and you'll enter your FSA ID account username and password, which you should have already created. After logging in, you're then able to select the role. Now that might be student or parents. As I mentioned earlier, there's also another term that it's called contributor, which represents both student and parent. It's the person basically completing it. Now, as far as the documents you'll need, it's going to be much simpler than you would have needed in the past. Primarily, a social security number will be the primary thing that you will need, and we'll get to some exceptions in a moment. But having copies of prior year tax returns from 2 years ago, essentially, having records of any child support received, having any current balances in bank accounts or investment accounts. Now, as far as the parent social security numbers, in some cases that may also be step parents. If you have a parent that is married and they are filing jointly, you would need that information as well. Okay, so in terms of filling out the form, compared to previous years, you're able to submit more school choices on your FAFSA form. It requires you to put at least one school, but you can now put up to 20 if you're filling it out online. Once it's submitted, the schools will automatically receive it that you select. Now, after that point, you'll need to figure out your dependency status. So it'll ask a series of questions to guide whether you are a dependent or independent student for the purposes of financial student aid. So some examples of things that could make you an independent student is if you are age 24 or older, if you're a graduate student, if you're married, if you are a parent or guardian of a dependent child, if you're active duty military, if you are homelessness, or if you are experiencing homelessness or at risk of becoming homeless, you may qualify as an independent student. If you're a dependent student, the parent information must be reported in addition to your own.
So the last portion about filling out your FAFSA is reporting any spousal information. So if you are married and you aren't separated and you filed your taxes jointly with your spouse, then you'll need to report your spouse's information on the 24 to 25 FAFSA form. Note, though, that they will not have to be identified as a contributor. However, though, if you are married and not separated and you didn't file taxes jointly with your current spouse, your spouse will be considered as a contributor on the 24-25 FAFSA form. And then finally is the last part about providing your financial information, especially as a contributor. The FAFSA form will ask for your financial information, including information from tax forms, balance of savings and checkings accounts, and other different assets and investments. And then finally, the FAFSA form specifically will ask for your 2022 tax information, not your 2023 tax information that is about to be filed. So again, it's based on your 2022 tax info. And then there's also the new financial aid direct data exchange that Sam alluded to early on with the implementation of the Future Act. This will help transfer all the contributors' federal tax information from the IRS directly to the FAFSA form, which dramatically simplifies the process. Whoops, skip too far ahead. And then finally, the last portion is just signing and submitting. So after you've completed all those required sections that Sam and I had just both touched on of your FAFSA form, you'll just acknowledge the simple term and conditions of the form and electronically sign your section. Note, though, that your FAFSA form isn't going to be complete until you fill out all the required contributors, whether that's the parent, any legal guardians, your spouse, provide all their information to the FAFSA form. And then also they have to give their consent and approval to transfer their federal tax information into the form and also provide their signatures. And then once all the required contributors have done all that, the form will then be technically considered complete and then will be considered for processing. And then after that, you'll see a confirmation page, which displays the completion date, your data release number, and next steps that you can do. You'll also receive a confirmation email that's tied to your FSA ID as well, which has the same information as well. And then finally, you'll also see an estimated student aid index, SAI, which has the estimated federal Pell Grant eligibility for the dependents and any information around other federal student aid, which they may be eligible for.
Now, as far as deadlines, the deadline for federal portion is June 30th, 2025. Now, even after you submit, there are opportunities to have corrections and updates, and that's due just a few months later on September 14th of 2025. Now, each school may have their own separate deadline, so you should definitely check with each individual school as far as what deadlines they have as well. Same with states. Each state, because it does go through state process as well, may have their own deadline. So we urge you to check not only the federal deadlines, but their school and state as well. And with that said, we are at the end of our presentation, but we have heard from many of you over the past few days of some questions that have come up, some things you may be concerned with. And so we've selected just a few of them to answer for you here. After that, we'll then take some from your questions here in chat. And as Ronnie said earlier, we may not get to all of them now, but after this session, we will go and answer all of them and send those out as well. So let's start with question number 1. I don't have a social security number. How can I fill out the FAFSA for my dependent? And Ronnie, I'll pass this one to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Sam. So the 2004 or 2024, I should say, and to 2025 FAFSA form was designed to allow parents or spouses to create a federal student aid account and submit their FAFSA without a social security number. However, though, you may have seen or have experienced that the new system is actually returning an error message for these specific types of individuals, which is preventing students from submitting their applications or their contributors from submitting their applications. The U.S. Department of Education recently announced that a permanent fix will come in March for these individuals. In the meantime, though, there is a workaround. So if a student is in a critical state that they need to meet an institutional or a scholarship aid deadline, then they should follow the steps in the hyperlink there. Again, we will provide a PDF version of these slides so you can access these links, and we'll also provide a copy of that form. I won't get too far into it because it may not be relevant to most folks here, but there is a workaround for the specific situation should folks need to go fill out the FAFSA ASAP in these experiences. This process, though, specifically will allow them to complete the form, but then will result in an incomplete submission that will need to be quote unquote corrected later. But that will all happen through their own automation, of course, because this is an error on the Department of Education's website. And again, they should follow the steps that they need to fill out the form. But otherwise, folks should be patient. Something will be coming soon in the coming weeks in March. So this next question to you, Sam, how about a dependent that receives more financial support from more than one parent?
Sure, thank you, Ronnie. So that term contributor that is now being used was partially done to account for different types of families, different family arrangements, to better encapsulate what people actually experience. So the information, consent, and approval of the parent providing more financial support over the past 12 months will be a contributor. Now, if there are step parents that are married and filed jointly with that parent, then both of them will be identified as a contributor on the FAFSA. Now, if financial support is equal for parents that do not live together, it would be the parent who has the greater income and assets that would be a contributor. So I will also say on the FAFSA website, there are some flow charts that might explain this a little better as far as situation. But this is better meant to kind of encapsulate and make the process easier to submit information needed. Now, going on to the next one, I think Ronnie touched on this earlier, and this one is to you. I have not filed my tax return for this year. Can I still submit my FAFSA for my dependent?
And the short answer is yes. So the FAFSA for this year uses your 2022 tax information, not your 23 information. So don't worry about needing to rush and file your taxes now. You can still fill out the FAFSA without that information. There are situations though, we've talked to some folks where they're like, well, my income has changed from 22 to now, or I may not be together with my spouse anymore, so this income does not accurately reflect my current family financial situation. In those specific cases, the best thing to do is to fill out the FAFSA anyways using your 2022 tax year, then contact the attending school for the dependents that are looking to attend the school, and then explain the change in income. They can then assess it independently and then also adjust your FAFSA form from their own end to adjust your financial aid package. So here's another one. Must all contributors, including those without a social security number, create a studentaid.gov account?
The answer is yes. And I will say with a little asterisk. So all contributors must create a studentaid.gov account. All contributors to the FAFSA must just go on and create that account. Now, as Ronnie mentioned, there was a bug in this process for some people without a social security number. The department is working on that. They have that workaround right now and will issue a permanent fix shortly. But the kind of longer answer is at the end of this, everyone that is a contributor must have a studentaid.gov account. All right. And with that, we've had some questions asking if the information provided will be used for purposes other than determining financial aid. Ronnie?
So the short answer is no. We've been hearing this concern a lot, again, specifically for those folks who don't have social security numbers. A lot of them may have an immigration status where they may be fearful for any acts of retribution that may affect their immigration status, especially when their dependent students are allowed to have financial aid, but this information is required to get the contributors. So the data collected by the electronic versions of this form specifically have been noted that are only for the application, award, and the administration of the aid awarded. That is specifically within statute of the purposes of this information. And again, like I said, the data will not be used for any other purposes like immigration or naturalization issues. And so here, the final one we have is, should I be concerned about the FAFSA processing delays that I've been seeing around all the different news stories?
The Department of Education recognizes this as an issue and have taken action to fix it as soon as possible. So the department will begin transmitting those batches of FAFSA information to schools in March. The department has already deployed experts to schools around the country, especially at certain schools like HBCUs, HSIs, and tribal institutions, to ensure that colleges have the tools and information needed to process these aid packages when that information is submitted to the schools. Ensuring that the technical support is there at the time that the data is sent, so that these applications can be completed by the schools section as quickly as possible. So students are able to receive their aid packages. Now, $50 million has also been provided to nonprofit groups that specialize in financial aid support. So in addition to the actual federal staff that are on the ground, there are other groups that specialize in this, and federal money has been allocated to them to help. Now, with that said, Ronnie, unless you have any other questions, I think we are ready to start taking audience questions.
Yep. So let's see here. Do you want to start with Sylvia, Sam? Do you want to take this one, or you want me to?
Go for it. I need to pull it up.
Sure. So Sylvia here has asked, I filed taxes in 2022 as married joint. Unfortunately, my spouse died in 2023. We're so sorry to hear that. Does the surviving spouse enter only their information on the financial and tax-related question from the joint 2022 tax year? I believe for this specific situation, you would still enter whatever tax information you filed jointly, because the FAFSA form is based on the previous tax filing year. But again, similar to the scenario we presented earlier, make sure that you get in touch with your dependent school to make sure you acknowledge that your financial situation has changed due to your spouse's passing. So make sure that you get in touch with the school, and they will hopefully get you set on that front and assess it differently from there with your financial aid package. Sam, anything to add on that one?
No, that's good. Let me jump in with another question. We had someone ask about the information used to determine which parent contributes more in case of divorce. Can a parent transfer information from their taxes if they're not the parent that claims the child on taxes? So it really does come down to what is considered a dependent for taxes. As I mentioned before, it does come down to the parent providing more financial support over the previous 12 months. So that does create kind of a weird situation where it's the past 12 months, but the tax information is drawn from 2022. With that said, you should defer to the guidance about the parent that is the dependent that receive, the parent that is giving more financial support from the previous 12 months.
Sam, I would like to tackle the one on Ted, if you've seen that one.
Go for it.
Sure. So Ted asked, what assets are being taken into consideration when applying for financial aid? Does this include homes, retirement accounts, land, stock portfolios, etc.? Also, what financial gains from the sales of such assets should be included as income regarding financial aid eligibility? So specifically, I'm not sure if I'm able to answer some of these. I do know that retirement accounts and stock portfolios of that sort definitely are considered into it. I also know different education savings plans like 529s are also considered as assets. I'm not too sure about the selling of homes, though I'm sure that would also be reflected on your IRS data and through your tax filings anyways, depending on the year. So I assume that would also be factored in some shape or form as well. We'll definitely get a better answer to that, but I would say good majority of those assets would be considered in terms of for the FAFSA purposes.
There is another question that just asked if parents filing jointly, do they each need to fill out a form or just one parent? And this is the situation that if you are married filing jointly, only one of you would be a contributor. So you don't need to fill it out twice because you're filing jointly. That's considered one tax unit, and that's all that you would need. But I should just clarify on that. You would still report both parents' information, but you would only need one person that would need to do it.
Here's a good one from Jennifer. She has asked, we have two children. They're both listed as beneficiaries for their own 529s. Would they be both listed on the FAFSA form? So both the 529s will need to be individually reflected for their individual FAFSA forms. So of course you would need to fill out two separate FAFSAs for the different dependents that you have. And then the 529s will need to be acknowledged for both of their forms, even though they are both listed as beneficiaries for them.
There was a question asking, one moment. Ronnie, do you have one that you're answering right now?
I just answered one through text, but not one to share.
Yeah. So one person asked, how do you determine who is providing more financial support? They say, I claim her on taxes. She's with me more of the year. And that, so in this situation, we may defer to others, but it goes back to just that definition of who is providing financial support. I'm not actually sure if that is in reference to specific child support agreements or if that is a broad term, but that is the guidance that the FSA has issued. But I mean, if they are claimed as a dependent and you are claiming them as a dependent and are providing more financial support, then you would be the parent that would do that.
Sam, correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but I'm reading this question from C. Johnson, and they asked that if a grandchild is in need and their parent cannot afford a Parent Plus loan, can a grandparent claim monies on their taxes? And I think the simple answer it would be is that if you intend to open a Parent Plus loan through the grandparent, then the dependency status would also need to go from the grandparent, and the grandparent would also need to be listed as a contributor on the FAFSA form. That would be the only situation where the grandparent could specifically take out a Parent Plus loan for that dependent.
That's my understanding as well.
Oh, here's a good one. Does FAFSA provide an exit counseling or video links to students graduating from college so they know how they can repay on their loans? Excellent question. I'm not sure if any of that exists currently out there. There's certainly resources about student loan repayment that exists on the U.S. Department of Education's website out of the Federal Student Aid Office. I don't think they have anything easy like that, like in a video format, or provide folks that provide that information. They might charter that out to servicers that may be assigned to their student loan accounts after they graduate as well. But I highly recommend them visit a bunch of the NEA resources that we have out there. A lot of our resources out there are relevant to even non-educators when it comes to student loan repayment and some of the best methods for repayment. I also see that there's a question about how can we circle back viewing the recording of the Zoom. All the recordings of all of our student debt webinars are uploaded to the NEA YouTube account. So you will get an email, an after action email for all registrants of this webinar, which will have a link to that video. You can also check and frequently see our account to see if it's been posted, but you will get first notice through your email account when it's been shared.
we had a question just asking, does any FAFSA money need to be repaid by the student? That really depends on the situation. So the FAFSA is required for any type of federal student aid or federal financial aid. That would include both Pell Grants, which are grants and do not need to be repaid, but it also would give access to federal student loans. And so depending on which loan that you get, if it's in the student's name, then they would need to pay that back unless they are receiving some other type of forgiveness.
Lisa has a question about when can you start submitting the FAFSA for the 25-26 school year. So the 25 and 26 school year, we have not gotten the timelines for that. Our prediction, though, is that the form will go live again in September, which is the usual FAFSA timeframe that we're normally used to. This year's especially different just because they implemented the new form and a new methodology because of all things from the FAFSA Simplification Act and also from the Future Act, which ended up having a delayed rollout to this school year's FAFSA form. But at the moment, we imagine that the FAFSA will have the regular time frame and you can start filling it out for the 25-26 school year in the fall.
And we appreciate all of your questions. If you have joined since we started doing this, we are taking questions that we will try to answer live. As I mentioned, we may not get to all of these. Some of them are very, very complex, and we want to be responsive to your specific situation. So if we're not able to respond to them now, we will get back to you to answer these questions. But the chat and the Q&A is open. If you have a question, either general or your specific situation, we will try to answer it over the next few minutes.
Sam, this isn't FAFSA related, but I'm not sure if you want to take this one. From an anonymous attendee, they said, I do not know if the money my child received is subsidized or non-subsidized or unsubsidized. Which does or does not need to be paid back?
Sure. So short answer is all of them need to be paid back. If you have a loan, that is something that you need to sign a promissory agreement. You need to agree to pay that back. Now, whether it's subsidized or unsubsidized, you would, when you get your aid package from your school, that would have all of the options listed to you, and you would be able to choose if you had loans available to you, which loans you qualify for and which loans you would be able to take. Now, I mentioned as far as paying it back, that is something you need to sign when you get it. But as we've seen, there are alternate pathways to either forgiveness or to different methods of payments that tie it to your income. So the income-driven repayment program, the newest of which is SAVE. Many people that are taking advantage of it pay $0 per month. And if they continue as part of that program over a certain period of time, their remaining balances may be forgiven. So we would urge you to just be very careful and look at what your the financial aid package is from your school. And then when you are or a dependent is signing a promissory note, just look at what the terms are of that. We also just here in our student debt team do like to point out that we are focusing on federal student aid. Now, there are sometimes private companies that offer loans. Sometimes they call them student loans. A good example might be SoFi, for instance. Now, these are private loans and they're not eligible for any of these other programs. So we highly encourage you to just be very careful that what you are getting from the school is indeed part of your student aid package. Ronnie, do you have anything to add on that?
I did not, but I would like to tackle another question if we want to move on. So I have one from Chris here. He asked that my son turns 24 in June this year. Will he be considered a dependent for the 24-25 school year, or will he be a non-dependent now? So just to go back through terminology, so dependents are those obviously that are tied to their parents' and parents' income, and independent students are those who are not. And so for someone to be an independent student, they have to be at least the age of 24. And that age of 24 is when they apply for the FAFSA, not based on whether they'll be turning it during the school year. So in this specific situation, Chris, you'll be able to fill out the FAFSA as still as a contributor, and he'll be your dependent. But if he's still in school for the following school year, he will have to fill out the FAFSA as an independent student.
We had a question from an anonymous attendee. Post-graduation, when does a student need to begin paying back money received through FAFSA? So going back to an earlier comment, it really depends on where that money comes from. If it is a Pell Grant, which does not need to be paid back because it's a grant, or if it is a federal student loan, which does need to be paid back. Now, I believe and Scott, I think you might know this better than me, the payment is usually 6 months, I think, after graduation.
Generally, yes.
Is when payment usually needs to begin. Now, there are methods to delay that. You can go into forbearance, you can go into different programs, but be aware that if you go into those, it may still be accruing interest. This is a good example, for instance, if someone, I think we had another question here, of someone that's going to graduate or professional school. You might not need to be paying that back from your undergrad immediately, but that will still accrue interest.
Correct.
Here's another question from an anonymous attendee. They had asked, can a parent fill out or parents fill out their form prior to a student completing their form? Short answer is yes. That's because when you go and fill out your FAFSA, one of the first questions they'll ask you is that whether you're filling this out as a dependent or whether you're filling out as a contributor. And so in the case of parents, you'll be filling it out as a contributor, and then eventually it will bridge those together.
Hey, Sam, it's Scott. Are you going to answer that question about PSLF Live?
I was actually about to see if you were Ronnie, but
sure.
You know, at the risk of taking a slightly different turn and talking about a slightly different topic, did either of you want to take that?
So I'll jump in. The question from the attendee was they tried PSLF, was informed that they need to consolidate loans. Is there another way? I don't need new debt. So I think the big answer to the question here is just because you're consolidating doesn't mean it's adding to your debt load. What it's really doing is pulling all of your loans together under one program and may actually allow you to get the credit that you've earned over the last few years. But the one but to that is you need to do it relatively soon because the deadline for consolidation and having all your previous payments counts is coming up quickly. So we should put in I'm going to put a link into our student debt navigator in a second. And once we do that, that should help this member go through the process to get their loans consolidated and hopefully qualify for the forgiveness that they need. Sam or Ryan, did you have anything additive to that?
No, that was great. And
okay, great. I'll put the link into our student debt navigator right now.
And we also, when we get to the end of this webinar, we'll have some great links or other student debt resources, specific stuff to public service loan forgiveness and other different student loan repayment resources to help our members along on that front.
Do it soon.
And also, I'll add that our YouTube account, which when you will find this recording, our YouTube account also has all the recordings of all of our previous webinars, including on topics of public service loan forgiveness. So highly recommend folks that if they have questions around that or want the latest on PSLF, please tune into those webinars. They're a great resource of walking specifically in this member situation, why you need to consolidate and what steps folks need to take to exactly benefit from them. But we've had some great success, just to say the least. Because of the Biden administration, we've seen $56 billion forgiven for public service workers out there, including tens of thousands of educators, a lot of them that are our NEA members. We've seen success stories of folks getting, 6-digit numbers in student debt forgiveness. So we love doing this and help providing these success stories to our administration friends and sharing that amongst our NEA members. So definitely encourage you to take a look at all those resources to find more about that and how you can be the next person to get your loans forgiven.
We have a question from Suzanne asking if FAFSA aid is available for graduate students. The short answer is yes. FAFSA is required to be filled out by graduate students if they are trying to get graduate loans, for instance, federal Grad Plus loans. Now, in almost every case, if a grad student is filling out the FAFSA, they will be considered an independent student. That was one of the options that would make someone listed as an independent versus dependent student.
Here's a unique question from Joyce. She had asked, what happens when a contributor dies? Will the Parent Plus loan be forgiven? So if the parent or the dependent student that is benefiting from the Parent Plus loan passes away, that loan will be discharged. That responsibility will not be put upon any other family member. Sam, do you want to tackle the Parent Plus loans eligibility for PSLF? I know Scott's typing it, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, if he's typing it, Scott, do you want to go over that?
Yeah, it's fine. So Parent Plus loans are not eligible for public service loan forgiveness, but as I just typed, you can consolidate those loans to actually get them eligible for public service loan forgiveness. Now, we're going to amend our question earlier because I'm not sure, given the anonymous nature of the asker, that would sort of reset the clock. So you would have to make 120 payments on those loans after they've been consolidated. But for a lot of people, that some of those payments may be a lot less than the overall payment for the loan itself. So I would really recommend, again, members using the Student Debt Navigator to help with that process. What's built into the system to allow members to understand the consolidation options and what that all means. It can be complicated, and we want to make sure that you do that correctly to get those things into forgiveness. We know the Parent Plus loans are a challenge, but we can help. But given their nature, I'm trying to sort of put the two questions together, and whether that's right or wrong, I'm not quite sure, but it would sort of reset the payment clock on those loans. But depending on the amount, it may be a huge relief when you do finally make that set number of payments based on some other recent changes to the save plan and everything else. So we really recommend going through the Navigator to help with that.
I think we only have time for a few more questions. There was one I did want to touch on. I've spoken about this a little bit before, but we have an anonymous attendee that talks about that the parents of the child, even if they're divorced, should be the ones for submitting financial information. They mentioned that step parents should not have to contribute for entire college education of a student that was only in their household for 1 year. Is this addressed in the new FAFSA form? So to clarify, this really comes down to how the government views like a tax identity. So the step parent issue only applies for a parent and a step parent that are married and filing jointly. So it would be the same, whether for any kind of tax units. And that really is the reason why that is the step parent is included, because for the purposes of government and taxation, they are one unit.
Sam, I wanted to tackle this question by Kayleen. She had asked, is there a limit to how much money can be borrowed in total for schooling over a lifetime? This varies in terms of different things. I provided a link, and I'll put that in the chat also as well, that provides the different divisions of this. But the easiest way to share it is between unsubsidized and subsidized loans. The aggregate loan limit for undergraduates is roughly around 57,000. And it's roughly around 138,000 for graduate and professional students. And then there's specifics to how much of that is specifically subsidized loans versus unsubsidized. But those are the loan limits. And these loan limits do adjust at times based on the cost of college. But that is currently what those loan limits are. I'll also add that if the loans do not cover, based on those limits, the cost of attendance for the dependent student, that's where Parent Plus loans come into place to fulfill for the remainder amount. Any final questions you folks want to tackle? Okay. So again, as Sam iterated earlier, anything that we didn't get to is not because we don't want to answer them live. Some of them might just be too specific to the individual that we need more information on to answer, or they are something that we just want to answer and double check ourselves afterwards. But again, anything that we weren't able to answer live, we'll send them via email for folks to all the registrants of the webinar. So I wanted to conclude again with the online resources. We heard from a lot of folks that had questions around for their own student loans and other loan forgiveness options. We have a student debt support page that lives on our NEA website that includes a ton of resources specific to our educators and our NEA members out there. That is great for folks to take a look at. That is nea.org/student debt. There are also hyperlinks here. And again, we'll send a PDF version so you can click through these links. We have pages around public service loan forgiveness. We have pages built around FAQs for that program, different things around how we're tracking President Biden's broad student debt cancellation campaign, and things around fresh start after default. Right now, it's given that we just resumed payments for the first time in the last few months after 3 years of no payment because of the COVID payment pause. But just to conclude, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Again, the webinar is recorded, so we will send that out once that is available to all the registrants. We hope you guys have a wonderful night, and thank you for all that you do as our educators across the nation. Take care, everybody.